You know, we hear it all the time. One day, social media is rewiring our brains and ruining our sleep. The next day, it's this vital tool for human connection. It's all pretty confusing, right? So in this explainer, we're going to cut right through all that static. We're going to use a massive scientific review to find the real signal in all that noise. So here's the question we all ask ourselves, probably while we're scrolling through our feeds. Is this actually good for me? It seems like such a simple question, but the answer? Well, it's anything but. Okay, let's really dive into this. And, the reason it's so tough to get a clear answer is that the research itself feels like it's all over the map. On one hand, you have studies celebrating social media for helping us connect. On the other hand, you have research linking it directly to things like depression and anxiety. And then a lot of big reviews have just thrown their hands up, saying the links are weak, inconsistent, or, well, just inconclusive. This is the noise we're all trying to navigate. So how do we get to that clear signal? Well, here's our roadmap. First, we'll quickly look at that confusing friend or foe debate. Then we'll bring in the massive study that's going to be our guide. After that, we'll unpack the huge difference in how we use social media, reveal the true health impact the data shows, and finally, figure out what it all means for you and me. Right, so let's start with this whole conversation we all know so well. One headline screams that social media is a villain for our mental health. The very next day, it's a hero for connecting the world. It's this constant back and forth that just leaves most of us feeling completely lost. But what if we could get above all those conflicting headlines? What if we could see the entire landscape of research, all at once? Well, that's precisely what one gigantic, systematic review did, and it's given us the clearest signal we've had yet. Okay, first off, you have to appreciate the sheer scale we're talking about here. This is not some small study with a couple hundred people. No, the review we're looking at pulled together research that included over 1 million individuals. That is a massive, incredibly powerful set of data. And this chart really shows you just how intense that process was. The researchers started with more than 6,000 different scientific articles. Then they meticulously screened them, filtering out all the noise. The studies that were too small, not quite relevant, or just weren't high quality, until they were left with only the most solid, rigorous data. This is how you find a signal you can actually trust. So, after all of that incredible sifting, what was the game-changing insight they found? It turns out the most important question isn't if we use social media, but how we use it. They pinpointed this critical distinction between two totally different ways of engaging. So, first up, there's what they call general social media use, or SMU. Just think of this as your everyday casual use: scrolling, posting, sharing, chatting. It's measured pretty simply, usually by how much time you spend online or how often you log in. For most people, this is the baseline. But then you have something completely different: problematic social media use, or PSMU. This is when that use becomes excessive, and it starts to look a lot like an addiction. We're talking about that compulsion to check your phone, even when it gets in the way of your work, your school, or the actual people sitting right in front of you. It's when it actively starts to limit your daily life. And putting them side by side like this, it makes the difference crystal clear, doesn't it? General use is really about quantity, how much time you're on, but problematic use is all about quality and control, or really a lack of control. It's defined by that compulsion and the negative impact it has on your life. And trust me, understanding this one difference is the key to this whole debate. Okay, so now that we have this key distinction, we can finally look at the data and see what's really going on. What happens to our mental health and our sleep when you actually separate these two different types of use? And here it is. This is the signal. Just look at the difference. On the left, for general use, the links to depression and anxiety are pretty small. And for your overall well-being and sleep, no significant link found at all. But now, look what happens when you shift over to problematic use. The links to depression and anxiety jump up to moderate. Suddenly, there's a significant negative link to our well-being, and a real, clear connection to sleep problems appears. This is the whole story right here. It's the problematic behavior, not just the time you spend online, that's strongly tied to these negative outcomes. The authors of the study really said it best. It's that addictive component, that feeling of compulsion, that loss of self-control, that seems to be the real ingredient causing the harm. It isn't just about being online. It's about feeling like you can't get offline in a healthy way. The study also gave us a really important clue about cause and effect. What they found was that general social media use could actually predict if someone might develop depressive symptoms later on.
But, and this is key, they did not find that being depressed first predicted more social media use later. So that suggests social media can be a risk factor, not just a symptom of an existing problem.
But wait, the story isn't quite over. The signal is clear, for sure, but it doesn't sound exactly the same for everybody. The researchers also found that things like our age, our gender, and even where we live can change how all of this affects us. For instance, it turns out our individual context really matters. Surprisingly, the link between just general use and depression was actually weaker in younger folks. At the same time, the link between problematic use and anxiety seemed to be stronger in females. And geography makes a difference too. These connections look different in Asia, Europe, and North America. It's just a powerful reminder that there's no simple one-size-fits-all answer here. So after all of that, what's the single most important signal we should take away from this mountain of data? It's this. We have to shift the conversation. We need to stop asking, is social media bad for us? And start asking ourselves, is my relationship with social media a healthy one? Because it's the how, not the if, that really, truly matters. And that, of course, brings the whole question right back to us, to you. Now that we can separate that confusing noise from the clear signal, we have a brand new way to look at our own habits. So, knowing this critical difference between just using social media and using it problematically, how are you going to think about and